Good evening. I just want to say that it's such a privilege to stand and speak like this, to have people listening to you. I don't take that for granted, so thank you for coming to listen to these words. I'm coming first with a story from where the fires are. We have fires burning. And this story is from the fire. And it is a necessary story. Do you want to hear it? Okay. So there was a world which was consumed by the element of fire. Everywhere you looked, people were devouring. But it wasn't fire outside at first. It was the fire in here. That fire which is the passion, which is all the things you want to take and grab and eat. And when the people were consumed by the element of fire, they didn't notice that actually a real fire started to burn to the north, to the east, to the south, and to the west. And when the fire was burning, the people didn't notice. But with fires, they fell, the great trees, and the great trees started to fall. And when the great trees start to fall, we know what comes next. The animals start to fall. But the people consumed with the fire, they were still not seeing the flames until the people too were taken by the flames. Everything that you have ever loved, everyone, everything were reduced to ashes. The whole world was reduced to ashes. Only ashes remained. But where this story comes from, there is another world. There is a river underneath the river. And in that place, there were two bird beings with great wings. They loved to fly. And they had grown up in this world that I've just talked about. But they hadn't experienced the great burning. So when they flew across dimensions with their great wings, they looked down and they thought, where is our village? Where do we live? We have a longing for home, but all we see is ashes. One person was still around. We call him the trickster. One eye closed, one eye opened. And he said, I know why you've come. You are coming to look for your old village. But you see, now what you see, they're only ashes. And these two bird beings, one of them was called Ikanshu, and the other one was called Kune. The trickster told them that if you fly with your eagle wings, because these are old angels had eagle wings. And when you fly, you know how eagles have those fingers? When the western wind comes, the fingers will point down. And when they point down, that's where your village once stood. And Ikanshu and Kune started to fly, and the western wind came, and their fingers pointed down, and they went down in the ashes. And they were down in the ashes, and they were looking for something to eat. It's, you get hungry traveling through dimensions. Ikanshu was looking for the ashes, and suddenly he found something. And he found a piece of coal. I'm telling you, Ikanshu was wise. And when he saw the piece of coal, a little tear fell onto it, because he understood that this was the piece of coal from the last tree that had burned down in this world. He held it in his hand. It was the last one. I'm going to ask you when you have held a piece of coal like this. And he held that piece of coal. And as he looked into it, he didn't know what to do. Should he eat it? No. Instead, he remembered that his grandmothers and his grandfathers used to make drums out of trees. So he beat on the piece of coal. And it made that sound. You can hear it inside of you, that drumming sound. And the rhythm of life. He heard the rhythm of life. And as he was beating on the drum, he started to dance. And as he was dancing and beating on the drum, of the piece of coal from the last tree that's been burned down in the world, he started to sing. Ekanshu. Now imagine this old bird being standing in the ashes where everything's been lost, drumming, singing and dancing for 9 days. And then he went down in the ashes. When he woke up, he looked at that piece of coal and he saw one tiny shoot was growing in there. A tiny shoot started to grow, and the tree of life, Yggdrasil, Harbadmus invita åren, was coming back. The tree that gives us the medicines, the tree that gives us life. So he saw it growing, and he wanted to continue. Of course, he had to continue dancing, and he had to continue singing. And the tree grew taller and taller and taller. And as it grew, he picked out rocks from the ashes and he threw it at the tree. Strange behavior. But the branches fell, hit the ashes, and more trees started to grow. And soon enough, from the rhythm of life, that last piece of coal, life was rejuvenating itself. From the singing, from the dancing, from the drumming of Ekanshu. And then people came back and the animals came back. This story comes from a small village in Venezuela who suffered enormously from all the things that is going on with their rainforest. But once a year, they go out and they throw rocks like Ekanshu onto the fruit trees. And when the fruits fall, they take the seeds and they crack open the seeds with their drumming and their singing and their dancing. And that is what we need to start to learn. We need to start feeling that rhythm of life again. We need to start to drum and dance again. And they share the fruit, and they share that raw possibility that this world can be restored. They share that. Let the star rise, let the wave break, and let the flame leap. And if your hearts are wise, this story is for you to keep. Thank you. So my name is Andreas Kornevall. I'm Swedish, I live here in the UK. And I run something called the School Tree Nursery Program, which is all about the growth of the tree of life. And we've decided as a model to look at what is the most effective way of getting the tree of life to grow again. And we had to look into the heart of community. Where is it? What is the heart of the community? And we found that it was the school. We found that the parents go to school. We all have children who go to school. So we started putting tree nurseries inside the school grounds. And the children learned 3 things. What are trees? How do they live? And why do they matter? Those 3 things they learn. And once they've learned that, they can go out and they can replant a woodland with their parents, with all their community. And since we started, we've done 1,000 schools. We've done 200 forests. And we want to do more. I would say this, if you are here tonight, why don't you let us help you to start a tree nursery in your school? We can do 50 tree nurseries here tonight, or 150. It's a very simple thing, but we have done it in Tanzania, we have done it in India, we have done it in Ecuador, many, many places. And I also ran for many years a campaign to restore the earth with the United Nations. What a magnificent failure that was. We wanted to call out the UN convention that all the major nation states just sort of get together and start restoring the major ecosystems. Yeah, that didn't work very well. And we call that that the military, of all things, should turn their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, because goodness me, do they have the cash to start really fighting the weather of mass destruction, which is the real fight we have in our hands, or the real issue. I don't want to say fight, the real issue we have. So that was one of those idealized things that went swooping down, and I landed with the school tree nursery program, who've done far better and greater things than that campaign. Although it's still simmering in the background. Who knows? I think restoration is inevitable. We are going to enter into the age of restoration. It will happen. It's just when. We just don't know when. But there's one more thing, which is the inner work that needs to be done. And for me, it happened when I lived in the Pyrenees. I looked at the mountains, and I realized when I saw the mountains that the mountains were beautiful because there was a bear in there. There were animals in there. And there was one whose name was Cannelle in français. Her name means cinnamon. The fact that she was there made the forest deeper, the mountains higher. 2004, a gunshot rang out, and the hunters shot her. It was the last Pyrenean brown bear, the one. Now, extinction has nothing to do with death. Extinction is all to do with the ending of life and the ending of birth. The ending of birth. We ended her birth after 20 million years of wandering on those mountains. And you know, is there any union in here? I projected, oh my God, my anger. Oh, I was angry. And I blamed the spiritual leaders. Those were the first people I blamed in myself. Where were they? Where were their wreaths? Where were their tears? Where were their expression for this extinction? They were nowhere. I blamed the church. I went and I even blamed the Buddhists. Yeah, I did. It was all anger, unmetabolized anger, as you do. And then I heard the same story with the Japanese river otter in 2005. And the same story with the river dolphin of the Yangtze. 50 scientists went through the river to try and hear one single squeak. Nothing. The river dolphin of the Yangtze went extinct 2006. And then the worst for me was when Lonesome George, all the knowledge we plucked from him, he was the one who met Darwin. He went extinct, I think it was 2013. Every university has been built from his shell. Every knowledge has been taken from his eyes. He ended his birth. I said, that's not right. With the gunshot of the brown bear, I had tinnitus. I got tinnitus from that sound, not from my ears, but really down here in the soul. And it's still ringing today. And I needed some instruction. I needed to see my teacher. I needed to find, who is it? Who can tell me of what are we supposed to do in the face of extinction? Please, I needed an instruction. I couldn't find it. But over time, I opened up the Poetic Edda. Some of you might know this book. It's certainly one of the most sacred books we have in the world. And it comes from Northern Europe. And when I opened the page, I got my instructions from a very unlikely person. One side of her face is a blossoming branch, is a blushed apple. The other side of her face is just a skull. She's half living, half dead. She gave me clear instructions right there. She said this: if you want life to return, if you want the tree of life to come up, if you want the light to return, you have to learn how to weep. Because grief is the stuff that clears out all the deadwood inside. If you cannot weep, that brown bear will stay out there in the dark. The Japanese river otter will remain extinct. And I realized that my eyes had been dry. All that time, there was only anger. And I had to move beyond the anger into grief. That's where the real work begins. And she said, not just you, everything has to grieve. The stones, the mountains, the rivers. And when the gods heard the instructions, they sent riders out to all the directions. And indeed, everything wept. They did. Except one thing that refused to cry. A giantess called Tok. Ungratefulness. She said, my eyes will be dry for the light and for life. And because of that, we are still looking for that place, for that light. But in the Norse myths, when you weep, the tears go into the well of memory, and that well of memory gathers that holy water to grow the tree of life. Like Ikanshu, when he had one tear on a piece of coal. That is what can crack the seeds. But it's hard work. And it's work for each one of us. And no one should bear it alone. So with those instructions, I started the first memorial for extinct species in 2011. It's called the Life Cairn. And it's been vandalized, and it's been destroyed, and no one wants it there. And we set up a Life Cairn for Lonesome George. We set up a Life Cairn for the river dolphin of the Yangtze. And we set up a Life Cairn for the Pyrenean brown bear. And we all got together, and we shared those tears. And I'll tell you that is how the tree of life returns. So what is the age of restoration? The age of restoration is plant the trees with the children, teach them what they are, find the rhythm of life. And the third is learn to weep and grieve and rid yourself of all of that deadwood in the soul. That is when rejuvenation can come. Thank you very much.